Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Night Light. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Hi, everyone. We have another legendary local, for me, UFO cryptid researcher, John Ventre. You've seen him on the Hangar One TV show. He has been the director of Pennsylvania's MUFON organization, and he produces their conferences in Pittsburgh, Erie, and Philadelphia. He is the author of They Are Us, The Time Travel False Flag, and An Alternative History of Mankind, and several others, but we're going to be talking about those two books tonight. You see him in the greater Pittsburgh area in a lot of conferences. We met again at the Brook Hills Paranormal Conference, and John had a fascinating lecture on werewolves. You can learn more about John by visiting his website, John Ventre, VENTRE.com, and MUFONPA.com. And we can also call him Sir John. We'll get into that as the show progresses. Hi, John. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on. I don't remember when the last time we spoke or did an interview. It's probably got to be 4 or 5 years, I would think. I got your books in, was it April at the Brook Hills thing, conference. Yeah. We also met at the Pittsburgh conference with Linda Moulton Howe and Kathleen Martin. Stan was there. Who's the other? He's actually interesting. He has an interesting book, Antonio Paris. Oh, that was a long time ago. Yeah. Antonio. It's funny. I don't know what he's doing now. At the time, he popped up. He was, I think he was working for the government. But like a lot of these guys, and I don't know. He wrote a book, and I don't know. He went to Florida, and I really haven't heard about him for a couple of years. I think he was another one of these government spooks.
in the field trying to find out what he could find out, like the current genre of Lou Elizondo and all these others. But I want to make a comment about, we met a couple of months ago. I gave a presentation on Dogman and werewolves, you know. But when we first did it, let's say at my house, we do a podcast with Fred Sluger. I was able to insert into the podcast there's a Dogman song that came out like in 1987. You know, what a cool country song! So we put it in the presentation, and then, as a kid, you know, I was like Super 8. I had my movie camera, and I'd make movies. But I made a werewolf movie back in 1973. So we finish up the podcast with the movie. You know, it's like 4 or 5 minutes long, and we put the werewolf. So if you watch it online at johnventre.com, it's so much better than the lecture I gave, because I couldn't do those as part of my lecture. You know. Yeah, it was cool. I'm telling you, that was one of the better podcasts, because we inserted those two things into it.
Okay, well, I need to reschedule Fred anyway, so actually get him to do some howling or sing along with the background music.
Yeah, he's the Bigfoot guy. You know, I've stayed away from Bigfoot because that's his area, and we both do UFOs. But I kind of look at some of these other areas also, and like I said, we did 118 podcasts, you know, and I've probably done about the same number of radio interviews. So and I guess 35 TV episodes and Anderson Cooper, but we'll get into that stuff. All right, so what do you got to ask me? Where are we going here?
Okay, so I noticed that while reading the two books, you have these mysterious women who give you top secret information.
Yeah.
So let's get into who some of these women are. Then maybe question 2 is you start you were fairly normal up until a recent age, and then you get the mysterious women showing up in your life. So maybe we can start with those 2 questions, and keep going. We have 2 hours of all kinds of fascinating experiences you've gone through.
Yeah, well, first thing I guess is that when you said I was fairly normal, but I wasn't involved in the UFO field until I was 41 years old. I knew absolutely nothing. I'm talking about nothing about this field. As a kid, I collected Famous Monsters of Filmland, if you're familiar with that old magazine. Yeah, I mean, it's so cool. I'd go to Comic-Cons, mostly horror cons, because I love horror and sci-fi. And I had no involvement in UFOs at all. And what happened was I'm traveling all around the country for 18 months with my job at UPS, and I'm really boring, because at night I'm not a drinker. I'm not going to hang out in bars and stuff like that. So I have all these ideas. I've always been creative. And I said, let me write a book. So I decided to write it on the Mayan calendar, and this is 1996. So I've given myself 16 years until 2012 to get this book out. I was going to do it on the millennium, the year 2000, but I didn't think I could get it done in time because I've never written a book. So as I'm researching on their end time prophecies and beliefs, I kept coming across them talking about what seemed to be extraterrestrials. People, Romans talking about people on flying shields, Coco Khan coming out, walking out of the ocean with all this knowledge that he gave them, and all these different cultures. So I write that book, and then I said, you know what? Let me write another book. I ended up writing 11 of them. But I said, I want to look into UFOs and what's the deal with UFOs. So, it's a couple of years later now. It's 1998, and I had gotten divorced, so I got plenty of time now on my hands. So I said, well, what am I going to do? I said, well, I'm going to join that MUFON thing. I remember seeing them on X-Files. They would show those three guys, the investigators, and I used to watch a show on Fox called Sightings. I don't know if you remember that. But X-Files and Sightings came on in 93 when the Fox channel came out, and they were the two best shows. I loved those. But Sightings, whenever they talked about UFOs, a lot of times they would talk about the MUFON investigator. So I said, all right, I'm going to be one of these MUFON things. So I joined MUFON in 98. And that's when I got involved in UFOs. And then I think it was 06 or 2006 or 7, I ended up becoming the Pennsylvania state director. So that's how I got involved in the field. And I think that's very different than anybody else in the field. When I talk to people, they've been in this since they were 8 years old, 10 years old. I mean, I knew nothing. And I made myself a subject matter expert, like I do with anything I get involved in. I really researched the history in some of my books, like They Are Us. There's a section in there once you get through the main part of that story. There's a, 60, 70-page section in there on the history of the field of UFOs in chronological order. And, I think anybody who doesn't know anything about the field, if you read that, that's the entire history that you need to know, So that's how I got started in all of this. So your question's about these three women, right? So this is the strangest thing. And, it started in 99. I said I joined MUFON in 98. So in 99, they do their symposium in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia. So I said, I might as well go. I joined. It's not that far away. It's a 3-hour drive. So I went to the symposium. It was really cool. I never I'd never been to a UFO event, and I met a lot of people there, different speakers, the people in charge of MUFON, all of that. And so I'm sitting there, and there had to be 500-600 people. There was a lot of people at this event. And I'm sitting all the way in the back. And I noticed this woman comes in, and, I turned to look at her. She's, pretty attractive. I'm single at the time, right? And she wasn't quite albino. She had light blonde hair. It wasn't white. It was blonde. But so she sits down. I noticed her come in. It was about 11 o'clock. I think that was on Saturday. And so within 12, we break for lunch. So I make sure I get online behind her, and then I sit with her, and we're talking. And it was just very strange. She had like gray, bloodshot eyes. And I couldn't help but keep looking at her, and I'm assuming she's part albino or a vampire or something. But, and then in the back of my mind, I'm saying, well, if these hybrids are real and true, they would come to a UFO conference, right? They want to hear what we're saying about them, So we go back, lunch is over at 1. I go back, I sit where I was sitting. I look around. I don't see her. I never saw her again. Saturday, Sunday, the event's over. And I said, wow, this is like strange. Who pays to come to the event and you're there for 1 hour and that's it. You're gone, And so I leave. And, and the connection with her, I didn't think about until years later. And, in my book, The Ufologist and the String Theory of the Unexplained, I mention her, but it's only maybe 2 paragraphs, and that's about it with her. But I keep in my head going back to her, was she alien? Was she hybrid? Because when I got home from the 99 conference, it was 4th of July weekend. I didn't stay for the fireworks. So I get home. And the next 4 nights, I had, what you would call an abduction, or some sort of paranormal experience. And that's why I keep going back to her. did she pick me out? Did I, because I went and talked to her, this then occurred? I don't know. But then we get into these other two, and that it's very blatant what's going on with those two. So so I'm home, and I'm 43 years old. I have an out-of-body experience. I'm 42 years old. I have an out-of-body experience where I'm floating above my house. I remember I could see my green Jeep Grand Cherokee parked right there in the driveway. I was right at the peak of the house. I felt like, you know how they say, if you're having that hypnagogia where you can't wake up, you just have to move a finger. I was going to touch the roof of the house. That's how close I was, the peak. And I said, no, don't do that. You might fall. If you wake up from it right then, like my eyes must have been starting to open. If I touch it, I'm going to fall into the driveway 25 feet, and then there was something in the room. There was a presence, and it was malevolent. This was the strangest thing. And then I had two very lucid, I had dreams, lucid dreams. But in the dream, I'm in a room, and, we do investigations. We ask, a lot of questions, what was on the walls, what color were the walls, all that. The room was just like a real light beige color, but it was like even non-distinct where I couldn't really see the walls, the corners. I got the impression it was roundish. The room was circular, and it was, I won't say foggy, it was like blurry, but a cream color, and my Doberman is there, and it's floating in the air horizontally with its legs out, right? And there's this 10-year-old kid standing there with his back to me. He didn't have a shirt on, and he's poking the dog. And I'm yelling at this kid, stop poking my dog. He's poking it in the ribs like he's never seen a dog before or something like that. This kid turns around, and I'm like stunned. He's got very large eyes, like twice the size that they should be. His hair is like all hair plugs. But, and I could tell he's a kid, but he's muscular. His forearm was like Popeye. It was big and muscular, and the bone was sticking out of his elbows. It was the weirdest thing, right? So, then when I wake up, what I did was I wrote it all down. I made myself a note, and my girlfriend calls me and says, John, there was a UFO sighting the night you're telling me this on 4th of July. She says it was at Penn State College and another one in Morgantown, West Virginia. Well, if you took a pencil on a map and drew a line from Morgantown to Penn State, it goes right over my house. So there was a UFO sighting in both of those locations. So now I'm saying, well, is this an abduction? What is this? And so I wrote it all down, and I printed her email of what she said, and I wrote all that down. Now, years later, when I decided to write a book on this, and I don't know how many years later, that was probably 10, 12 years later, I said, okay, so I'm thinking about it, and I said, okay, in that dream, there was a kid standing there, and he had this rat boy face, and he had slicked back hair, and he's wearing like a black leather jacket, long coat. And that's what I remembered of this hybrid-looking kid. So I pulled my notes out because I wanted to get the dates and everything correct. And there's a completely different, narrative there. And then it all came back to me. So it's like, was one real? Was the other one a screen memory? One of them was absolutely. I think the kid with the rat boy type face and buck teeth and the in black. He kind of looked like Nosferatu, except he had hair. I think that was like a screen memory is what it was. The real one was the other kid with the big eyes and the hair plugs, poking my dog. So I had 4 nights then of very weird, lucid dreams, out-of-body experiences, absolutely an entity in the room with me. I was getting just a couple hours of sleep at night. So, and that was the first UFO conference I ever attended. So that that was the first one. And then what happens, though, is that from that point on that I got involved with MUFON, every couple of years, there was something that happened. You know, we can get into this more later. I want to continue with these women. But every 2 or 3 years, something very unusual would happen in my house. And a lot of times it's around Thanksgiving when my kids were here, because they were living in New Jersey. I'm living in Pittsburgh. But I would see them every other weekend, and I always got them for Thanksgiving. So we can get into that later. But, you know, and some people say, well, you're having a demonic encounters, and others, the UFO people, all say, well, no, you're an abductee, because the things you're describing is what happens to these people. And we'll get into that later. So then this other woman I meet, I'm on MUFON's board at this point. It's 2013. I got on their board in, I think, 2011 or 2010, something like that. So I said, all right, let me go to Roswell. I've never been to Roswell. I got to go to Roswell. If I'm in this field, I better go to Roswell, you know. So I fly into New Mexico. I go to Roswell, and I go to the museum, and I noticed this albino woman there. You know, so she's staring at me, but she didn't say nothing, right? So, I go to the museum. At night, I go to this Chinese restaurant, you know. So I'm sitting there eating. She comes walking in, right? She comes over. She sits at my table, and she says, I got to talk to you, you know. And at that point, I had been on a couple of TV shows. Probably the most prominent one was UFOs Over Earth, because that was the MUFON-based show with the Bucks County case, which was the biggest case I ever had investigated. But 2013, I had been in other TV shows on the Discovery Channel. UFOs Over Earth. There was Close Encounters, Alien Mysteries. I was on the Anderson Cooper show in 2012 with a 45-minute interview. So apparently she knew who I was. So we have a 2-hour conversation in the restaurant. Now, when I write the book, and you read the book, I put that we were in the car, and I was driving her to Santa Fe, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to expound on that a little more. The actual conversation took place in that restaurant. It was about 2 hours, and she says she's a hybrid. She's part alien, right? So I'm asking all these questions, and she's trying to convince me that, you know, the whole ancient alien theory, that they were here, that they didn't create us, but they upgraded us, you know. And then we have this conversation, and I'm agreeing, I'm disagreeing on certain parts. I'm saying, no, I believe in this. And she says, no, this is what it is. But what stood out the most with her was when we talked about these malevolent interdimensional entities, demons, right? She got, I can't say she got pale, because she already was, but, you know, that's what really struck her, fear. And she said, we have that in common. We are afraid of them just like you are. So apparently that's a link between us and the aliens, for example, wherever they come from. They have these same problems with these demonic entities, these evil, malevolent spirits, whatever. So the conversation's over. It's like the restaurant's closing down at 10 o'clock. So I said, okay, you know, and I went to my room and I made a whole bunch of notes and all of that. So the following day I'm leaving. I'm driving to Santa Fe, and it's a 3-hour drive, I think 177 miles. I'm leaving Roswell. There's that main street. I don't know if you've ever been there. And
I have not.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm leaving. I'm almost at the edge of town. There she is, hitchhiking. That same woman. Now, I saw her in the museum. She came to me in the restaurant. She's walking down the street with her thumb out, hitchhiking. And I look at her, and something inside me, that voice said, do not pick her up. Do not stop. It's one of those where we made eye contact. I turned my head to the right. I looked at her, I didn't stop. And she was not carrying a purse. She was not carrying a bag. She was just walking down the main street hitchhiking. And once you get another half a mile, you're out of Roswell. You got a 3-hour drive basically through the desert. There's one town about halfway with a gas station, and this is even creepy. There's this like 1950s diner with all of these girls, and they weren't on skates, but they were wearing those type of outfits that they would wear back then in the 50s. And you got
like
this
from Happy Days.
Yeah, you got this 1950s diner because I had stopped there to get lunch when I was going to Roswell. And there's a gas station, and most of the stores in the town are closed down, you know. But I didn't pick her up. But when I wrote the book, you know, in the storyline, An Alternative History of Mankind, you know, I said to myself, how am I going to tell the story of what this woman said in our long conversation? And I don't want to say we're sitting there eating a poo-poo platter. So you know, I said, okay, I'm going to say I did pick her up, and you know, and I think that's, you know, it's a novel format, and I think that's probably what a lot of writers do is they get information and then they'll turn it into more of a longer storyline based on what the person had said. So that's the second encounter, you know, with this woman, and I wrote The Alternative History of Mankind. Now, she was definitely albino. She had white hair. She had gray bloodshot eyes, you know, white eyebrows, all that stuff, right? So now, last year, 2023, I go to Scottsdale, Arizona. I'd never been there before, right? So I go to Phoenix first, do some sightseeing, then I drive to my timeshare in Scottsdale. So I see this complex on the right side of the road. It's like this circular complex. And I said, you know what? I'm about a mile from my timeshare. I'm going to go back and see what this is. It was called Arizona Boardwalk, you know. So I go back. I don't know if it was that night or it was probably the next day that I went back. And this is one of the coolest places I've ever seen. It's a circular complex. There's a Ripley's, believe it or not. There's a dinosaur exhibit. There's a UFO exhibit, a UFO experience, I think is what it's called. The coolest UFO, exhibit you've ever seen, you know, better than Roswell. And then there's some other like things for kids. There's a whole bunch of restaurants. There's an alien type restaurant, you know, and so I go in there. And I'm in there, and you know, I'm behind this guy and his son. He keeps turning and looking at me, and he says, "You look familiar." And I said, "Well, I was on Hangar 1. I was with MUFON." He goes, "Yeah, that's where I recognize you." You know, So then I see again another albino woman. Right? She's in the exhibit. She's like standing, I don't know, 20 feet away. These are pretty big rooms. And she's looking at me, you know, just like the other one in Roswell was looking at me, right? So I get done with that. The next day I drive up to Cave Creek. It's about, I think it's 18 miles north. And it's like an old western town with Indian stores, a lot of places you can go and buy stuff, you know. So I'm up there and I go to a restaurant and I sit down and I'm eating. This albino woman walks up to me. She sits down right across from me. She's got this manual, this, you know, book, and she slides it over to me and she goes, "I know who you are. I saw you at the exhibit. I got to give this to you. I don't want it. There's a guy following me. You'll know what to do with it." You know, so, you know, we talk for a little bit, you know, for a while, and not as long as that other one. And then she abruptly gets up, knocks my water over, so it pours all over the seat. So now if I'm going to like follow her, I'm going to slide across the seat all full of water, which I didn't do. And she just left. She left. So then I take this book and I go back to my room, and it's this old. Well, it wasn't actually old. It depends on how you look at it. It's this manual from the Navy. Right? And what it said was U.S. Naval Intelligence Manual on Time Travel. I said, oh, this is interesting, right? So it's 13 chapters, 211 pages. I looked to see where it's published. It says by Naval Institute Press. It was like a light blue cover, and it was published in Newport News, right? So the only thing is it had a published date of 2073. 2073. And I'm saying to myself, there's no way. I said, there's no way. I'm being pranked here is what's going on. Because in 2073, there'd be nothing published. Why would they publish books in 2073, right? I mean, most everything is digital now. All my books are digital. You can get printed copies too. But, most of my sales are probably more digital than printed. So I then I go through this whole thing, and I don't want to give the whole storyline away because I want people to buy the book, But basically, she now the difference with her is she's got the white hair, the white eyebrows. Her eyes are very light blue, bloodshot. That was the only difference. The other two were gray, and there was a difference in height. They were different. That first one in D.C. was maybe 5'10". The one in the Roswell Museum, I think I'd put her around 5'7" or so. This one was more like 5'5". There was a difference in height, and they were not the same person. Let me put it that way. They were three different people, and this one had different color eyes. But what she's telling me, and what's in the manual is UFO encounters are extremely rare, and we got all of our technology from the 1936 UFO crash in the Black Forest in Germany. And, and I had heard about that and I knew about it, and basically then the Nazis got it. They didn't know what to do with it, but that's where they were using it to do the Haunebu, the Bell, Die Glock, anti-gravity experiments. And then, they lose the war and we get all of that information. That was the basis for Roswell and most of the UFO encounters. And I'm not going to get into too much of that, but then it goes into the time travel. So it gives you like the history of ufology. There's really only one crash that's real, and that's the Black Forest, 1936, right? So I'm saying, okay, well, what about all the others that I know about? Kingman, Aurora, all these other places, Kecksburg, all of that. But then it gets into the Space Force, and that basically we created that Space Force. Trump didn't create it 5 years ago. It was created back then, and that has been the UFO cover story throughout the years. It's been our technology that you see in the sky. And it gets all into all of that stuff, the My Labs, all of that. So really interesting read, and I write my book, They Are Us, the Time Travel False Flag. That most everything we've been told in this field has not been the truth. And it's like everything else, when you really look at it, politics, everything else, how often are we actually told the truth? We're not told the truth very often. Everything is spun for whatever the objective is they want to tell you, whether it's COVID, whether it's vaccines, whether it's global warming, whether it's UFOs. If you listen to Fox, you listen to CNN, you're getting two totally different versions of the same story. So I think it's a really cool book, all three of them. So I ended up writing The Ufologist. That's all of my encounters. I wrote that one. Then I wrote The Alternative History of Mankind, based on the Roswell woman, and I wrote They Are Us, based on the Arizona encounter with another woman. So I think in the future, when I'm doing these conferences and speaking around the country and stuff, these are the three books I'm really going to push, rather than 11 different copies of books that I take with me, and I got 100 pounds of books with me. I think I'm really going to stick with these three because I think they're really important, But what I did, though, is I then did some research, and because they got me really thinking. And of course, I go back to that woman in D.C., which I never paid a whole lot of thought to, but she was always in the back of my mind. Was she a hybrid? And why did those occurrences happen to me after my first UFO conference? You know, that didn't make any sense. I went to Comic-Cons, horror cons, which, you know, would have been very creepy. Nothing ever happened. Never had any nightmares, bad dreams, encounters, anything. But I go to a UFO conference, and then I have all of this stuff starts happening, right? So now I'm really thinking, you know, so I do some research, you know, and I knew genetically, like humans, you can't reproduce with chimps. I mean, they've tried to do that. Apes and chimps and humans are the closest, let's say, that there could be, 96% similar. So if we can't reproduce with a chimp, how do we reproduce with an extraterrestrial? They can't possibly have the same DNA, chromosomes, that type of stuff, right? So, you know, I do some research, and I said, well, there's really only 5 ways that you could have a hybrid, right? Either these UFOs we're seeing are us from the future, and then obviously they're human. Maybe they look different because something happens environmentally or genetically to them, but you could reproduce with us from the future. Or, you know, you have the hollow earth theory. They reside here. They've always been here underground, or, you know, or, you know, the Nephilim, if you go to the Bible, you know, they mated with us, these fallen angels, these interdimensional malevolent entities. Well, those were actually angels who disobeyed. Those were angels that mated and then became fallen angels, you know. Or, you know, again, I'm thinking, well, if there's life in space, they have to have the same creator or progenitor that they came here and created us, right? You've got to have that similarity, or you can't really, you know, mate, let's say. Or if there's some sort of genetic engineering that we don't understand that can cause it. But you know, I've always been really skeptical of the hybrid thing because I know the genetics isn't going to work. You know, you can only mate with what's in your species. Dogs and wolves, you know, lions and tigers. You know, you can't mate with something outside of your species, and we don't have anything outside of our species. You know, all the racial groups are in our species. There is no difference other than skin color when you're talking about races, you know, because all the genetics, the internal organs are all the same, and they use them for transplants and operations and blood and all of that, right? So I get into this, you know, into the book. Well, a couple of the books I wrote, you know, so what are the explanations for these aliens, you know, and 90% of everything that's written, let's say TV shows, movies, all of that, it's the extraterrestrial hypothesis, right? That they're from space. And that was proposed, that was first proposed by Major Kehoe after the Thomas Mantell incident where he chased the UFO and crashed. He was the one that said these are from outer space, they're extraterrestrial, right? So then you got the ancient alien theory, which was the woman in Roswell. That's what she was trying to convince me of. That, and when you look at, and I don't care for Giorgio Van Daniken. I think they've made the UFO field a joke. You know, so I don't like to reference ancient aliens because that is just so blatantly, you know, not true. Let's say, and the way they present it, you know, I see it as very blasphemous, and it's entertainment. That's the word I'm looking for. It's entertainment. But the ancient alien stuff, ancient astronaut, basically is, if you look at the Bible, angels and God and heaven are really, you know, aliens and spaceships and that type of stuff, right? So then you got the prison Earth theory, and there's 8 or 9 or 10 of these that I listed in a couple of my books, you know. So then you got, you know, that Earth was like a place, like a Devil's Island or Botany Bay, where they dropped off their unwanted, or, you know, like we did, you know, the people who don't listen, the criminals, that type of stuff. It's like a zoo, a prison Earth. So that's the third theory. Then you got your interdimensional, they call ultra-terrestrials, and that's, you know, there's 11 dimensions, and they're able to come through a dimension, right? So that, you know, the funny thing is, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, the longer you're in this field, I would say once 15 years, 20 years of research, I've been doing it 26, almost, I won't say almost everybody, but the more well-learned people in the field believe it's interdimensional. I don't find a lot of the old-timers, saying that, oh, yeah, they fly here from space, billions of miles, millions of miles. A lot of them know that a space thing doesn't make a lot of sense. It's most likely interdimensional. And, that's my opinion also, right? So then you have your demonic theory, right? So these are this is the return of the Nephilim. They're able to manifest the craft in the sky, or the bulk of what happens to you is actually them putting it in your head telepathically, like the out-of-body experience I had. Maybe I wasn't floating above the house. That was just them putting that there. The kid I saw, the two, I don't know, was I really in that room with my dog? Or was that just something they planted there in your head? Or did they take your soul to another place? I don't know. It's hard, but there are also a lot of people who feel that the whole ET thing, the Greys, all of that, is basically demons. That they're disguising, they're tricking us. So I put a lot of credence into that demonic side because in the other book I wrote, the what's the name? One it'll come back to me, but I do a lot of comparisons between the demonic and the alien abduction, and I find about a 70% match between the two, so which doesn't make a lot of sense, It shouldn't have that type of a match, but it does, A string theory of the unexplained. That's the name of that book, Okay. So then you got the crypto-terrestrial, right? That's the hollow earth theory. That was first proposed by Mac Tonys, that they live under the ground, that type of thing. You have time travel, extra temporal. It's time travel. There's hoaxes, and none of this is real. And that's what a lot of the scientific community will tell you. You got the psychological explanation that Carl Jung. It's a projection in your mind, or magnetic fields cause these delusions, or they're just delusions. You got the military, which is what I touch on in that book I wrote, They Are Us, that the military's involved in this. It's a cover story. The UFOs are a cover story for our technology. And they test stuff on people. So a lot of the cases throughout history, like 1977, like Colares, Brazil, a lot of those, Vahinha, Brazil, they would go. There's a lot of cases in South America, and I think that's where we went and tested some of our technology, and that falls in line with Project Solar Warden when Gary McKinnon had said that. But most of that is disinformation, and it's being staged for us to think there are UFOs, but it's really our technology. So I'm telling you all of this, but I don't really know the answer. So those are the some of the explanations. So I'm going to get into next this paranormal link between UFOs and the paranormal. But let me put it back on you. Is there anything you want to ask me since I did most of the talking?
Okay. Several times during your presentation, you brought up ETs or the fallen angels. You're getting into a little bit of spirituality interpretation.
Yeah.
You do have references to St. Augustine in your book. On page 179, you do have Lord Hill Norton believed that there was a satanic origin to UFOs. Okay, so you have several examples of darker interpretations of this phenomenon. How has being knighted a Templar given you maybe a better understanding, or helped you to form your opinion? Is there even some kind of connection with your being knighted almost a year ago and how you view UFOs?
Yeah, it was kind of weird because I met that woman in Scottsdale, and then 2 weeks later I flew to Europe to be knighted as a Knights Templar. So, I don't know if there's a connection there or not, but, I think if you could read all my books in order of when I printed them, you would see a development in the way I think, or even a change, because initially I was all extraterrestrial, the history of UFOs, the Pennsylvania case, it was, aliens from space. And then you see this change coming as more and more of the paranormal things happen to me, and which is what I want to get into next. So because of all of this, I actually, in 2014, that's where the change took place, and I actually started to become a reborn Christian. I had been so far away from the church, any beliefs, that type of stuff, spiritual, but 2014 is where I started a different journey. It's like I went full circle. I was a kid who went to church, but then really forgot all about it, and I was more interested into monster movies and magazines, and then I got into the UFO stuff, and it turned to me very malevolent in my life, and I'll get into some of these things that happened, and then I went full circle, and I went back to religion because of my UFO or demonic encounters. Whatever this malevolence, it was here for a long time. When it showed up, really from 1999 to, it really ended this year. Nothing has happened since June of this year. So I don't know that I can't say it's over. It's only 3 months ago, but it's been very peaceful and quiet in my house. And I don't think we're going to get into every single thing that ever happened, but so I don't know. So I kind of look at the becoming a Knights Templar. Maybe that was part of it also, a warrior of God, because I've always felt like that. We don't carry swords around anymore, but I always felt that if reincarnation was true, I would have, at some point. I don't have a big interest in guns, and I have guns and rifles, but I don't like war movies. I got no interest in the Civil War, World War I, World War II. You never really find me, going to those museums or anything. But you show me steel, a knife, a dagger, a gun, something like that. I have interest in that. I don't have interest in guns and war movies. But show me a Roman movie, an Egyptian movie, Gladiator. I'm all into that, and I feel like there's something there with that, and if I ever had lived another life, it was probably as a Knights Templar in Europe. I could absolutely see that, So, who knows? We're not going to know what the truth is until we're dead. And then you'll see everything the way it was, your life that you didn't really understand at the time. But, I look at this whole demonic thing, and there's a lot of people who believe that now. Actually, when you look at Jacques Vallée, he the UFO people revere him so much, but he says a lot about how they can't be from space. He has those 5 reasons why they're not extraterrestrial. He really punches so many holes in it, but he never, ever calls them demons. devils, demons, and that's smart on his account because for some reason, I don't know what's happened in this country, we've pulled so far away from religion that nobody wants to hear of that, But just recently, Tucker Carlson, earlier in the year, I'll give you his quote. It's my personal belief, based on a fair amount of evidence, that they're not aliens. They've always been here, and I do think it's spiritual. That's my view, and it's not provable, but based on the evidence, I think. That's what Tucker Carlson said. And there's a long list of people. I'll get into Lord Hill Norton later and others, but I see so much evidence that, we have forgotten a lot of the myths and stories and things throughout our history, prior to, let's say, Jesus. You look at those stories of giants, right? Of, Cyclopses and Goliath and creatures and, Leviathan. I mean, and I put this in a couple of my books. I absolutely believe that stuff was true. I think that these interdimensional malevolent entities, they showed themselves. They showed themselves. And when you look at the Egyptian gods, I mean, where do you come up with these 8-foot-tall guys that have animal and bird heads? I think they were real. If you think about crowd control, the Pharaoh walks out with a couple of these standing behind him, everybody drops to their knees, right? I think that stuff was real, and I think a lot of those myths and stuff were real, and I think they showed themselves. And, one of my theories is when Jesus was crucified and he said, now it's over, it is over, he was referring to a lot being over. But part of what he was referring to is the open reign of Satan on earth, where he showed himself, demons showed themselves, in different forms. That was over. And they went more of the spirit, interdimensional. They do show themselves occasionally, but not the way they used to. They're almost like they're not allowed to show themselves like that. But we've completely forgotten all about that. So now we have these encounters and stuff, and we say, oh, well, we saw something. A lot of times we see something, a UFO or something, and it's like, oh, they got to be from space. These are aliens from space. I don't think they are. I think it's something interdimensional, But, and I think I'm probably the one ufologist that's semi-famous that says that. I don't think there's really very many others other than Joe Jordan, which most people don't know who he is. I don't think there's a whole lot that is so convinced that this is interdimensional and malevolent and not from space and says it publicly.
Yeah, John, you mentioned in They Are Us that you do have a $30,000 reward to if you can prove. There's a ET. So what about some of the petroglyphs, or like we just mentioned, Goliath? So pay up now, buddy.
Yeah. Well, that was something I had put out there. I didn't put that out just this year with the book. I had put that out in 2018 or 2019 because, again, in this journey that I've taken, I finally got to the point where, show me the beef. Show me the proof. Where is the proof of these hybrids? The DNA, the alien proof, the crashes, a piece of a crash, something. So I put out a $30,000 reward, $20,000 of my money, $10,000 of Pennsylvania MUFON. We had made a lot of money from our conferences, and they agreed we'd put this reward out there. And so we put it out there for proof that aliens, hybrids are real. And I got a whole bunch of stuff back that didn't prove it, So that was really at the point then in 2019, I went into politics. I pulled away from the UFO field. And I said, you know what? I've learned all that I'm going to learn. And I said, I'm not writing any more books. And then I wrote, I don't know, maybe 4 more books since then, two on the UFO field. And then I wrote 2 other books that have absolutely nothing to do with any of that. One was on COVID, and then the other one was on the history of slavery, but I wrote a couple more books, on the UFO field, with this last one, which I really believe this last one is the last one. I hope it is. So I don't know. But let me get into this paranormal stuff. I did some research here, and I think, it's funny how every interview I do, I mean, we could talk about the history of UFOs, the best case I ever had and everything, but it always turns to the paranormal because of my personal experiences, So I take a look at this now, and I'm, as I'm going through the years, I'm leaning more to interdimensional, paranormal, it's malevolent, it's preternatural, that type of stuff, and I don't really believe it's from space. So I looked some stuff up. 30% of all people have had a paranormal experience. 14% have seen a UFO, and 3% believe that they have been abducted. So in one of my books, I think it was The String Theory of the Unexplained, I come across Kenneth Ring's work, So I'll get into that in a second. But when you look at he looked at near-death experience, right, and abductions, and then I looked at demonic infestation and abductions, right? But if you look at what's positive in that whole realm, near-death experiences are actually positive, right? And I'll explain why I say they're positive. It's not positive they almost die, but the encounter is actually positive. Anytime you encounter the Nordics, those tall whites with the blue eyes, those are always positive encounters, and the same thing with angels, right? Those are all positive experiences. When you encounter on the negative side, people's encounters with the grays are probably 95% negative. Every now and then they'll do something positive, and it's almost like the trick to reel you in. Well, they cured somebody, they did this, they did that, but the bulk of what they do, it's negative. It's a kidnapping and rape that takes place, and you can't stop it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Right. So Bigfoot counters, they're negative also most of the time. Shadow people are negative. Slender Man is a very negative encounter. The reptilians and the insectoids, if you encounter them, that's all negative stuff, right? So the only positive stuff in that area is angels, Nordics, and near-death experiences. So I take Kenneth Ring's work and I read his book, and I compare it to the demonic encounter. So one of the things that he says, and a lot of other people say, that when you're in this field and you've had an encounter, whether it's alien or it's demonic, or near death, you become a lot more self-aware. It's almost like it evolves you. It takes place like in an altered state or a different dimension, but you change the whole way you think once you have one of these encounters that are not your normal, everyday physical encounter, let's say. So what Kenneth Ring had said was the near-death experience, right? He says it's life-threatening, but it's very peaceful. You're swept up into the light, you meet your relatives, there's an examination of your deeds, and you're given a choice whether you want to stay or return. So when you look at the alien abduction or demonic infestation, that's sudden, it's very frightful. You're taken by creatures, you're not taken by relatives. There's a physical examination, not an examination of how you live your life and your deeds, and there's no choice to get out of it. They come back whenever they want to. You're basically a slave of theirs for genetic experiments. And that happens in the demonic and in the alien, right? So in the near-death experience, your memory is fully intact. Well, in the other ones, your memory is impaired, and you have stuff come back to you, like I did. Like I said, I clearly remembered the one kid, right? But then when I went to my notes, there's no mention of that kid. There's only the mention of the other kid. back in 1999. So one of those was a screen memory, you know. The near-death experience is very emotional, obviously, but the abduction demonic is very stressful. Near-death only happens once, most of the time, and it's to adults, mostly, right? So the abduction demonic, it recurs. It's like a slavery. It comes back and it comes back and comes back, and a lot of times it starts as a child. So I find it very interesting, and I put a whole thing together of markers in one of my books, right, of what markers overlap. And then I read a bunch of the, the famous books on Betty Andrezian, Carla Turner's books, all of these people. And I'm saying to myself, wait a second, that's not alien. What you're describing in your book is this interdimensional malevolent entity. And these are the markers, those demonic encounter infestation markers. They're not alien. And I proved that in the book that I had written, The String Theory of the Unexplained. And that's why I called it that, the String Theory of the Unexplained, you know. So that's, taken me into the paranormal side. And I went into, these three women. But most of my encounters are around Thanksgiving. And it's really weird. Why are 80% of my encounters when I have my kids? Because my kids, I got divorced in New Jersey. They stayed with their mother. I drove there every other weekend, 610 miles. I never missed. I saw my kids every other weekend. And they remember that, and they know how dedicated Dad was, right? So it's Thanksgiving of 2004, right? So my girlfriend here in Pittsburgh, she moves in with me. My kids are here. We have a good time. We watch football games. We go to bed, right? So now I close the bedroom door. It's probably 12:30. The kids are down the hall in their rooms. So we're in bed, and we hear somebody walking up and down the hallway. And there was I remember it being heavier steps than you think that the kids would have been. I guess maybe not. My son would have been 20 at that point, my daughter 18. So in the morning, my girlfriend worked in a furniture store. She used the bathroom in the hallway because she had to leave at different hours than me. So she left. So I get up, I go into the main bathroom there in the bedroom, and there's two arm prints on the mirror in the shape of a cross, like crossing each other. And in the book, I put that in there. That's in one of those books, right? It has 6 fingers. It's skeletal. It's only the outside bones. There's no meat in the middle. I measure it. It's 3 inches longer than my elbow to fingertip. So I'm 6 feet tall. If that part is 3 inches longer, it would be 3, 6, 9, 12. This thing is 7 feet tall, at least 7 feet tall, right? And it left this trace evidence. I've got a picture of it. I've put that in a couple of my books, and I got a video of it. If I could ever get anybody interested in doing one of these shows on TV, I would make the video available where you really see it better than the Polaroid I had taken. So then the kids get up, and I ask them, what were you doing in the hallway last night? And when kids are lying to tell you the truth. My son's mouth drops, and he goes like, Dad, we thought that was you in the hallway. So apparently
they heard it too.
Yeah, they heard it too. My daughter said, Dad, I was so scared. She says, I went into my brother's room, and she slept in that room because she was afraid to be alone in her room. And that was smart on her part because I'm going to get into some other things that happened. But again, now remember, 1999 was this hybrid woman, my first UFO conference, and my encounters with these, out-of-body experiences, all of these lucid dreams. So now, 2004, like I said, every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, something happens. 2009, 5 years later, right? It's 5 a.m. in the morning. The way my bed is, it looks right down the hallway, right, if the bedroom door is open. So I wake up suddenly. It's 5 a.m. There's somebody standing down the hallway. I'm looking. There's a guy standing down the hallway, and he's backlit, which was really weird. I'm looking at him because he's right where he is. The attic door is open, and you can go up the steps, but it's almost like the light of the attic is on. And I can see him as a silhouette, but I can't see features because he's backlit. And the hallway's really dark, you know. But his head is above the door frame. He's got a square head, so I'm saying, is he wearing a helmet? Is this an alien? And the waist, I don't know if you remember the prawns from that movie. It was at District 9. The waist was like 12 inches. I'm looking at this thing. It's got long arms, long legs, almost no waist at all, so it doesn't eat anything. It's got like a 12-inch waist. It's got a square head, and it's taller than the door frame, and it's frozen in place like I wasn't supposed to wake up. You know, like in these alien abductions, the woman's awake, she's being abducted, the husband's sleeping, and she can't get him to wake up. Well, I woke up, and I'm looking, and it's like I'm rubbing my eyes, I'm slapping my face. I crawl to the footboard, you know, so I'm 6 feet closer to it now, even though it's down the hallway, it's 25 feet away. And I'm saying to myself, well, there's somebody standing there. You're taking kickboxing, step over the footboard, go down the hallway and hit this thing as hard as you can. I'm about to do that. There's a voice in my head says, you don't want to do that. That could be unsafe. You want to step off the bed and put the light on. So right away I think, oh, I thought it was my thought. It wasn't. You know, I said, oh, I work for UPS, safety first. I got up, I put the light on, it's gone. I go down the hall. You know, I look for footprints because the cleaning lady had just vacuumed that day. I walk back. My Doberman is sleeping there at the top of the stairs. I walk past him twice. He doesn't wake up. He doesn't acknowledge me. He's laying there snoring. You can't walk past the dog and him not wake up. I don't think I've ever walked past my dog and the dog doesn't turn his head and look at me. You know, they're very light sleepers. So now, you know, this thing is there. You know, it's like somewhere between the prawn and Slender Man, you know, except he's not wearing a suit. He's just very tall. And I'm saying, what is this square head? So I lay down and, you know, something happens. You can't go back to sleep. I open my eyes again. I see a light outside. And it's pulling away from the house and getting duller and duller and duller, and it's gone. So I'm saying to myself, holy, you know, what was that? Is this alien? Is this a craft? This thing left and the craft pulled away? I don't know what this is. I really don't know what happened. You know, the UFO people say, you know, it was probably an abduction. He brought you back. You know, it was leaving, that type of thing. I don't know, but it was very, very weird. You know,
has the same type of event happened again, or is it just a one-time experience?
Well, that was the only time I ever saw a creature. Now, I have seen shadow figures in the room. And my daughter in 2010 got attacked by shadow creatures in her bedroom upstairs. You know, that was clearly, you know, unless shadow people are alien, I don't think they are. They're some spiritual interdimensional thing, whether they're ghosts or demons. I don't know what they are. I don't think they're demons, you know. But they attacked her in the bedroom. That was in 2010, the following year, you know. And that's another story. But it's in one of my books, you know. You know. Then again, like 2013 is this Roswell encounter, you know, with the woman. Well, then 2014, and that's why I referenced 2014. It's June 6th is my 20th anniversary of being divorced, right? So it's not like I'm celebrating, but it's just a date that sticks in my head. So it's June 7th. It's the day after my 20th divorce, which to me was a big deal. It separated me from my kids, my wife, you know, to me, and I don't even understand how it even occurred, how she did a 180 and became a different person. You know, it's almost like when I watch a lot of these haunted shows on Travel Channel, you see that in there. They even say it, the personality change. Well, she had a complete personality change, like a haunting or a spirit attachment or demonic attachment or something, you know. So it's June 7th of 14, and you got to remember, 2013 I did. Well, I filmed Hangar One, but the first season of Hangar One on the History Channel just aired in February of 2014. It ended probably in February, March, April, end of April, something like that. It's over. So now it's June. I'm in between seasons 1 and 2 of my big UFO opportunity and show, and people now know who I am all across the country, and something shows up in my house. Right, so I go upstairs because every in the summertime, this is June, in the evening, once the sun goes down. Well, you live in the area, it cools off. As soon as the sun goes down, it drops under 70. I open that attic door because there's 2 skylights with screens, and the cool air comes in. I do that every night in the summer. I let the cool air in. So I go upstairs, and when I get outside the bathroom, it stinks. And, you know, I take a step back, and I don't smell anything. I take a step forward. There's a column of smell in the middle of the hallway right outside the bathroom. It don't smell in the bathroom. It doesn't smell in any of the kids' bedrooms. There's a column of smell. And right away, you know, in my head, I said, oh, what, did the dog do his business up here? It stinks. So I'm looking around, and then I'm smelling, and I say, you know what? That's not that. This is like rotting flesh if you ever smell a dead animal or something in the yard. I said, this is like something like rotting flesh. So I put the fan on in the bathroom to try to pull it out. And I go downstairs. I'm watching a baseball game. I remember Detroit Tigers because they were good back then. They're good right now, too. But back then, 10 years ago, they were very good. So I'm watching the game. I got this 110-pound Doberman. I was his 6th owner in 10 months. When I got him, he was 10 months old. This is the meanest junkyard dog you ever want to see. This dog bit me 3 times, right? He has never, ever approached me for affection. That's not the way he was. He comes over to me. I'm sitting in the recliner with my legs out. He lays across my legs, like to protect me, right? And I looked, I said, wow, this is really unusual. This dog, you can barely pet him. When you pet him, you have to watch him. If he pulls his lips back, he gives you about 3 seconds notice. He's going to snap at you. My son used to say, you're crazy, Dad. This is a 110-pound Doberman. This thing was fierce and powerful because I have 2 acres and it runs around. This thing was all muscle, you know. So he's laying across my legs. I'm watching a baseball game. All of a sudden on the wall, boom! This is sonic boom. The dog, I'm looking at the dog. He's right in front of me. Both of our heads turn to the right simultaneously. The picture on the wall lifts up about an inch, and I have 2 Indian headdresses on each side. The feathers blow to the side. So I said, holy cow, what is that? The dog sensed something was in the house, right? So the game's over. I go upstairs. That smell is still there in the hallway. I turned the fan off. I said, I'm going to bed. So I laid down. The dog would lay on the little bench thing there in front of the footboard. I could see his head above it as he didn't lay down yet, you know. And I'm getting the weather before I go to bed. In my bathroom, again, a sonic boom. Boom! The dog and I, both of us turn and look. So the dog hears it again. So, you know, I go to bed. I said, I don't know what this is. So the next day I start thinking about it. And I said, well, something's not right here. You know, I reach out to my UFO investigators because what I did years ago with MUFON, I recruited ghost hunters, paranormal investigators to be UFO investigators because it's the same thing. If you can investigate one, you can investigate the other. So I spoke to 2 of them in particular who did the ghost hunting and stuff and told them what happened. They said, John, if you smelling it like that, you have a demon in your house. This is a demonic entity in your house. This is not a ghost. And now I'm afraid. I get nervous. I said, what's a demon doing in my house? You know? So, so from that point on, for 10 years, June of 2014 to June of 2024, I have all kinds of paranormal activity in my house. And I'm not going to get into all of it. Birds flying into the windows. I had my yard burst into flames. I put blessed pendants in the four corners of the house, the four corners of the yard, and the outside of the fence line where the pendant was, the whole yard burst into flames. It was incredible. I saw it. I got pictures of it in one of my books, and I called the fire department. All kinds of stuff happened, banging sounds, scratching sounds, and the dog would react. We'd hear these nails walking across the tile floor. And I'd look at the dog, and I'd see him looking down on the ground, shaking, like moving his head back and forth, like he's looking at it. We all both hear it. There ain't nothing there, but we hear it. So I know it's real because the dog is reacting to it. And just there's so many occurrences that take place. So, and again, I don't want to go into all of them. You're going to read my books if you want to find out what they are. But that's what started me on this, looking back at the religious side, the spiritual side, and studying demonology, where, I think I could go into an exorcism and participate and drive the thing out. I know so much. I read every book on exorcism by Gabriel Amorth, Malachi Martin, all of the real, not really hauntings. I've read them, but really the demonic stuff. I've read so many books on this, written by priests and pastors and all of that, So then I wrote a few books with that angle, that alternative history of, not the alternative history, the string theory of the unexplained. That's where I looked at a bunch of UFO cases, and I point out these are the markers of the demonic, the interdimensional. These are not alien. These are not UFO. And, if anybody wants to read that book is like 450 pages long, but it compares the UFO to the demonic, and then my encounters are in there. The ufologist is only my encounters, and so it's only 200 pages, So that's where that stuff happened, You want to ask something?
John, with the you're talking about some of these cases happened. Your encounters happened around Thanksgiving. You're talking about you document the coming under attack from a malevolent entity on the day after the 20th anniversary of your divorce. Do these demons focus on these certain anniversaries, days? I've heard, some of our guests, like Michael Carter's spoken about. He's had visitations when there was like a full moon or a new moon. Are anniversaries playing some kind of role with these events?
Well, I wouldn't say, the one was my anniversary. Well, I bring up, the 2014 was definitely the anniversary of my divorce. But when you think about it, nothing has happened since June, which is then my 30th anniversary of the divorce. This house has been clean, quiet, no tappings, no nothing going on the walls. But leading up to this June, the past couple of years, I've had so much bad luck. And, and I've talked to a lot of people in this field, how all of a sudden their luck changes. Connie Willis, we had a long talk about that. Jan Harzan. There's a whole bunch of people that when you're in this field, what is it about the UFO field that's paranormal? And it's almost like I feel like I got marked. In 2014, when that thing showed up, it marked me, and it kept coming back. To me, I feel it was demonic. I don't believe that it was alien, even though a lot of my occurrences you could say was alien. The guy standing down the hallway, the light outside, 1999, the lucid dreams, the out-of-body experience, the hybrid kids, you could say that was alien. I never got the impression that this stuff was alien with me. I always got the impression it was malevolent. And even my daughter, when she got attacked by the shadow people, she said, Dad, this thing was so malevolent. And she refused to ever sleep at my house again. She's never, ever stayed over at my house since 2010, because of that occurrence there. What happened in 2009 when they heard the walking up and down the hallway, and 2010 when she was attacked by shadow people. But I want to make clear that there's other people that have seen stuff. There are people in my house that have seen a black shadow, a black, like milky cloud just move across the ceiling. I saw it. My girlfriend saw it. My sister saw it. Her husband. There's a whole bunch of people that saw this thing just roll across the ceiling, a black like cloud, and it was like you see in some of the movies. It was like rolling water. I don't know. You can't even describe it. But I'll tell you what happened in 2017. So, you know who Travis Walton is, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you know Jennifer Stein and Steve Mira?
I do not.
Okay. All right. Well, Mira's from Manchester, England, and Jennifer Stein lives in the Philly area. She did a documentary on Travis Walton. So it's the 2017 Philly and Pittsburgh conference, right? So we have all these people in Philly. We do the conference. They stay at Jennifer's house there a few days. She drives them across the state because the Pittsburgh conference the following weekend. They stop at Gettysburg and a few places. They get to my house. Well, they come out here on Friday, right? Saturday's the conference. So she calls me. She goes, all right, she's got my address. She put in the GPS. She calls me and she goes, John, she says, I'm sitting here in a cemetery. I said, what do you mean? She goes, I put your address in, and it took me to a cemetery. I said, hold on a second. I went out my back door on my deck. I saw her car. I waved. She saw me. It took her to the cemetery behind my house, right? It's not the first time that happened. When my daughter had that encounter in 2010 with the shadow people, well, this is one of the things. Wonder when the one just pressed into her body, she could hear them talking. There was like a room of crowded people. And the one said, when you're done with her, I want to try out the other two, meaning my son and his fiance in the other room. When we told them that, they packed up at like 4 a.m. and they left. My son put his address in Virginia. It took him to a cemetery. He called me. He goes, Dad, we're at a cemetery right now. I put my address in Herndon, Virginia, and it took us to the gates of a cemetery. So it's not that this is not the first time that this happened, right? So I then said, all right, I told them how to get to my house, to go back out and go around, and they get to my house. So now we put Travis and Fred Saluga, Fred, we put them in the hotel. Yep. We do the conference here. We put them in the hotel. Fred, this is Friday night, right? So before we do the conference, Fred's in his hotel room, right? So the next day he tells me, he says, John, there's 3 knocks on the door. I don't get up. There's 3 more knocks. He says, I get up. I have my gun. He goes to the door. He opens the door. There's nobody standing there. He locks the door. He lays down. The phone rings. He answers it. Nobody there, right? So we do the conference. We take Travis to the Hilton in Pittsburgh near the airport. The next day he calls me. He goes, John, same thing that happened to Fred happened to me. So these are some sort of tricksters. He said, knocks on the door, nobody's there, phone rings, nobody answers. And this is like 3 a.m. that it woke him up. Same thing with Fred, the following day. So very weird. Actually, it was 3:30 in the morning for both of them. Very weird stuff, but again, witnesses to this crazy activity. So I want to tell you how I got the demonic entity out, although I didn't get them all out. I got the main one out of the house. So I brought a priest in, right? And that worked for about 6 months. He blessed the house. But it all came back. The noises, the banging, my dog going crazy, spinning in circles, the most vicious barking. And again, this is a 110-pound Doberman. When he's getting ready to attack, So one of the guys I know, he lives up in Du Bois. He's doing a movie. He makes movies. And he says, John, I'm doing a movie called The Exorcism Prayer. And he said, I got 5 priests, ministers, pastors, and 5 cases. Well, he has 4. He says, I want you to be one of the cases because I know what happened with you. I said, okay. So he goes, here's the deal. I'm bringing a minister down from Sharon, PA. We're going to film in your living room. You tell us what happened. Then he will bless you and he will exorcise the house. And he's done this. He's an exorcist, but he's real. He's a minister. So he does that. He goes room to room saying the prayers, holy water, holy oil, puts the crosses above every door frame, window frame, everything. Boom. That demonic entity now is out of my house. But I still get a lot of other stuff happening. And, I've had so many things happen. Like I'm in Vegas, right? July of 2021, right? So I'm in Vegas and the smoke detector in my room, goes off at 4 nights in a row at 4:15 in the morning. Think about that. You're sleeping 4:15 in the morning, 4 nights in a row in Vegas, the smoke detector goes off. I got to stand on a chair, press the button to turn it off. 2 weeks later, I'm in New York by West Point filming a vampire movie. I'm playing a detective in the movie, right? And I'm staying at an Airbnb. 2 nights in a row, I'm in this woman's house. Now, she leaves and goes to Manhattan for the weekend and says, I have full run of the house, right? So 2 nights in a row, 4:15 in the morning, the smoke detector goes off. How is that possible? It was in Monticello, New York, while filming the transubstantiation movie.
I don't have an explanation.
Yeah, I'm saying the stuff that happens to me is just, I don't know. It's just incredible. It's just incredible, So, but there's been so much other stuff that happened. So I don't know. I don't want to turn this whole thing into the demonic side, but it's really changed my opinion of the UFO field. I view it with different eyes that, what I thought was maybe abduction, alien really turned malevolent. And I read a lot of stories along that line that we're being tricked with a lot of this stuff. And it's funny, the new group that's out there from the government, the AARO, the guy that was in charge of it, he made a comment last year as he was leaving that position. He was leaving that with the AARO. He says that UFOs are real, but aliens are not. Think about that. UFOs are real, but aliens are not, which is, again, one of the reasons when I wrote the book, They Are Us, the Time Travel False Flag, and that's what the woman had said to me, too, that it's our government's technology, and they use the UFO as a cover story. So that's basically what this guy, it's basically what this guy has said,
Okay.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that whole piece of it where the government has come out now and said UFOs are real? Because this started in 2017. Actually, it started before that. Yeah. Now get this. It's 2008. We have that big UFO wave across the state of Pennsylvania. I end up on UFOs Over Earth on the Discovery Channel, right? So the following year, 2009, we get funding from Robert Bigelow. He's going to fund certain investigations where he pays for the rental car, the hotel room, any evidence that has to be examined. I said, this is really a good thing, And it lasted for 1 year, and then Bigelow pulled out. He had some discrepancies with MUFON, the way they were controlling the money and everything, so he pulled out of it. So, then we find out years later that he was doing all of this because he got $22 million from Harry Reid, right, out of the Pentagon to do this. So from 2009, the military covertly is funding our research, trying to find out what MUFON knows, you know. And there's also that Tom DeLonge, you know, Academy of the Stars, if you're familiar with that, they put that group together. But Tom DeLonge makes a comment. Well, they make a comment that they're concerned about Satanism, and he makes some comments about these people are heroes that investigate and don't do this because they're really fighting demons. So that's interesting that he's the front man for all of this, and that's what he says. And also, if you think you have this figured out, you have no idea. And I think most of the people have no idea. He says, yeah, they're heroes fighting demons, right? So I started looking at all of this. You know, they put out, I don't know if you remember this, $2.6 million in shares. They go public. They sell shares in this company. They go bankrupt. You know, they take in $2.6 million, but they go and spend like $30 million and they bankrupt the company. So I don't know why they weren't investigated, you know. But the whole thing, in my opinion, that was all a scam. They took a young rock star to get young people involved. So that didn't work. So now it kind of like disappears, right? So now they come out with this Lou Elizondo guy, right? You know Lou? You know, so he
I'm a little bit familiar with him.
Yeah. So he worked for the government, and he was in charge of this, you know, looking at UFOs. So it's all BS. It's all BS, you know. So and of course he leaves his good-paying job with the government. I'm telling you, he's still getting paid by the government, right? But he makes a couple of comments last year, right? He says people are going to find out that these are not monsters from space, but our neighbors. So I'm saying to myself, I read this in the paper. This was like a New York Times interview. And nobody asked him, what do you mean by that, our neighbors? Like our neighbors in Iran, our neighbors in Atlantis? Like, what does that mean? That these are not from space, they're our neighbors regarding the UFOs. You're saying somebody else has UFO technology more than we do, right? Then he makes another comment that he wants to blow up ufology. He doesn't want any private UFO groups, right? So he thinks it should all be done in a closed room with, whatever, NASA and scientists, and they're going to tell us their findings with no oversight, you know, typical top-down type mentality. And, you know, it's just kind of interesting that right after he said that, Jan Harzan gets in some trouble. So did somebody set him up? Did somebody go after him? I don't know. So then the Navy comes out and they say they want to prosecute groups or individuals spreading false rumors regarding UFOs. That's like the censorship you see right now on Facebook, you know, where they censor anything that Christians say, conservatives say, Republicans say. But there you got the Navy saying they want to prosecute people that investigate UFOs and say, well, you know, whatever, it was an alien, it was an abduction, whatever. They want to control all of that information. So I don't know. I look at that whole thing. I think that's totally phony what the government is doing, and you know, and that's in my book also. They Are Us. This is all the covers. This is the cover story. It's the cover story, is what it is.
Okay, you know, we have 25 minutes left, and you know, I did want to give you time to promote coming Philadelphia conference. Yeah. And we can get back to the books, but you know, I did want to make sure that there is plenty of time to plug it. So, what is unique about next month's Philadelphia conference?
Yeah, well, 4 weeks away. It's November 1st and 2nd. We skipped the Philly conference last year. This is our 16th year there, but last year the Sheraton got bought out by the Marriott, and they raised the prices, incredibly, like 5 times more expensive for the food. So we skipped the conference. We didn't do it last year. So we're back. I was able to work out a deal with them. But we got a really good lineup on Friday. You got Robert Spearing, who's the head of the international investigations with MUFON. He's going to talk about horrifying bedroom entity encounters. So it's kind of like what I was just talking about. But he's looking, again, he's looking at it as though they're alien. I look at them with a different set of eyes, and I want to hear what he's got to say because I guarantee you these are not alien, Then we got Frank Chili, who is going to talk about thought propulsion. Then we do a cocktail hour with food and open cash bar. Then my presentation is on the possession of Hitler. I'm going to go into that 1936 Black Forest crash and how they got the technology, but the fact that Hitler was demonically possessed, and I can prove that from some research that I did, some things he said, witnesses to his behavior, and other stuff. So I think it's a pretty cool presentation. And he was all into the Templars, the German Templar Knights and all of that. So it kind of goes hand in hand with my being knighted as a Templar. And then Fred's going to finish up Friday night talking about Bigfoot. So on Saturday morning, we have James Krug, who's really good. He's going to talk about invasion of the body snatchers. So that'll be interesting. We got Paul Hynek, who's going to talk about Project Blue Book and growing up with, UFOs and his father. I think that's a cool presentation. Bill Burns talking about the day after Roswell. Nick Pope talking about disclosure. Is it coming, ready or not? And then Ray Keller talking about the stranger at the Pentagon, that famous case from the 1950s. So, to sign up for that, you just go to MUFONPA.com, and that's our 16th anniversary, our 16th conference in the Philly area. I think we've done, next year probably be 18, it'll be our 18th here in Pittsburgh. Well, it's really in Westmoreland County at the Westmoreland Community College. So, that's that. My stuff, if you want any of my books, just go to Amazon.com. If you got Nook, you could go to Barnes & Noble. But the bulk of my sales are on Amazon now. And you can find all of my books there on Amazon. And if you go to my website, johnventre.com, about halfway down you see where it says free conference lectures and podcasts. Just click on that. And I got 118 podcasts with probably about 100 of them done with Fred Saluga. So there was a lot of cool stuff there, a lot of information in those podcasts.
Okay. It seems like Bucks County is getting a name for itself for paranormal type encounters, research. Hopefully we'll be able to get Eric Mintel as a guest. He's doing a lot of work there in Bucks County. John, are you noticing something about Bucks County that could be contributing to it? It's something about the colonial history, William Penn being in the area.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But Westmoreland, it was interesting. I think it was Popular Mechanics did put a thing out about UFOs, and they talked about what counties had the most UFO sightings. Mm-hmm. And they listed Westmoreland County, is the number one county if you don't have a city in the county, like Los Angeles County, Right. But it's the number one small county as far as the number of UFO sightings here. And also, it's one of the high ones in ghosts and Bigfoot and all of that. And number 5 is Bucks County, but that is only based on the 2008 UFO wave, where we got like 250 sightings over the summer, which, I kind of talked about that I had become the state director, and the following year I'm in the middle of this gigantic UFO wave, and I'm doing the Discovery Channel comes in, and they're filming UFOs over Earth while we're in the middle of this episode, this investigation, and they made it one of theirs. But that was cool because they paid for the analysis. We sent some stuff off to we had trace evidence. We sent it to 3 labs, and they paid for it. And they did a lot of stuff that we didn't have the money to do. And that case with Denise, I don't know if you remember, she was the one that she saw a triangular craft, and it dropped these metallic sprinkles into her tree, and then they got sucked back up like with a magnet. And that's where we found boron on the leaves. But I did that on 4 TV shows. I did that episode on 4 different TV shows, and it got me on the Anderson Cooper show. I mean, how many people did Anderson Cooper? I did a 45-minute interview defending her and these 2 young girls from Kentucky who say that they were abducted. I thought it was a really good show, But the thing with the girls, though, I'll tell you real quick with them, and they were like 22 years old when we did Anderson Cooper in 2012. They saw a UFO. They were in the car with the 2 or 3 other guys, and they chased it through the hills of Kentucky. They came over this hill, and she said they stopped. There were like 5 UFOs hovering in a field, and from that point on, they were abducted. And they recalled standing in a room naked, right? And this gray alien comes over to the one girl, and she had most of the memories. The other one only remembered very little, but it touched her hand, and she remembered she had an encounter with this same one years earlier, like 4 or 5 years earlier, or maybe it was longer than that, maybe when she was a teenager. She had leukemia, and she was in the hospital. She was supposed to get a bone marrow transplant, and in her room, this alien came and touched her, and she was cured. And she never got the chemo, and she was cured of leukemia. So when she was abducted in the craft, it was the same alien, the same gray. So she kind of equated them with angels and not demons, which was a really cool story. But I'll tell you, from my standpoint, something else happened that I will always remember. We're there, ready to go into the show. We don't know who the guest is that's in there for the first 12 minutes. So it's like commercial break. They got us all mic'd up. They say, all right, you got to get in. You got to get in. Out walks Fran Drescher, the nanny. I was in third grade with her in Flushing, Queens. So she comes walking out. They're pushing us. And I said, hey, Fran, I never got to talk to her, right? But I wish, in hindsight, her and her husband believed they were abducted. I should have said to her, Fran, turn around. I was in school with you in third grade in Flushing, Queens. Turn around, follow us back in, and help me defend these 3 women against Joe Nickel of the Skeptic magazine. How cool would that have been? But that was cool. I was in third grade with her. I'll never see her again. And I had that 5-second encounter, which, if I knew how Anderson Cooper and the Skeptic was going to try to go after the girls, I could have used her help with that, But I do want to tell you this because we're running out of time. And there is a quote from 2005 from Philip Klass. I don't know how many people know who Philip Klass is, but he was one of these big-time skeptics. He always went after the UFO people, why it's not alien, all of this, right? So he's on his deathbed in 2005, and he makes this quote, and I think this is probably as true as there could be. He said, and I think he knew the truth. He says, no matter how long you live, you will never know any more about UFOs than you know today. And that's true. I don't know any more about UFOs today than when I joined in 1998. I can't prove anything. I know the history, but I don't know anything more about it, right? He says, you will never know any more about what UFOs really are or where they come from. And I think he says that because they're interdimensional. They're not from space. And if they're interdimensional, you can't really get your hands on one, you know? Then he says, you will never know any more about what the U.S. government really knows about UFOs than you know today, because they're not going to tell you, right? As you lie on your own deathbed, you will be as mystified about UFOs as you are today, and you will remember this curse. And you know what? I think he knew the truth, and this has stood the test of time. We don't know anything more about UFOs today than we knew 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 20 years ago, you know. And then you mentioned that Lord Hill Norton in 1997, he put something out called the UFO Concern Report, you know. So you know, it's funny, all the research I've done, and I've come across all these other documents and reports that when I was with MUFON and I was on their board for 3 years, they never talked about any of this stuff. It was always lights in the sky, what did the radar show, the physical aspect to UFOs, right? So, you know, and I remember, and I'll tell you something that's really odd. I'm in a board meeting with MUFON in Vegas. I think that was 2011 or so, 2012, somewhere around there. And, you know, I brought all this stuff with me, the Air Force 370 manual that talked about UFOs, the Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control, the Cometa report. And at break, I said to them, hey, guys, I want to show you this stuff. This all proves UFOs are real. There wasn't one comment about it, right? So then we take the break. We go out in the hallway, and Tom Dooley, who was like second in charge, and Clifford Cliff, who was the international director, they're standing there. So I went up to him and I said, you know, the reason I stay in this field, I never intended to stay in it this long, and here I am on your board, is the reason I stay in it is because of a lot of quotes by generals and politicians, and this stuff that I showed you where it's documented. They taught a class at the Air Force Academy on UFOs in 1968, 69, 70, in the Fire Officer's FEMA-approved book, Chapter 13 on UFOs, right? They break out laughing. And I look at them, and then they caught themselves, and they went to a very serious face and said, oh, yeah. And I walked away, and I said, why did they laugh when I said that? Because a lot of this stuff is planted as the cover story for our technology, right? So another thing, and you mentioned the UFO Concern Report, in England, Lord Hill Norton, so he's a big name there, right? He puts this report out basically saying that the whole UFO thing is demonic. You know, we need to look at the spiritual side of this. And in MUFON, we have never discussed this. I don't think I've ever been at a conference that brought this up either. You know, he first says that a lot of what people are seeing are basically spy planes, and they're misidentifying it. But then he said there's three categories, right? So it's some sort of secret device, and that can be proven that it's the military's craft. So that's one explanation. He says it's spiritual and even physical, which is, you know, angels and demonic encounters. And he says that's proven. And he says the third explanation is they're extraterrestrial. And he goes, that has never been proven. We've never proven anything in that field. And then he goes into some of the spiritual stuff, the Bible, saying you got to read the spiritual realm about fallen angels and demonic spirits. And Satan is the prince of the power of air. And he says that's where you're seeing the UFOs. So, you know, I thought that was really interesting. But the thing is, all of this other stuff that I have discovered, you know, in the UFO field and put in my books is stuff you would never hear from MUFON or a MUFON a symposium or a conference. I present this stuff at the conferences I run here in Pittsburgh and Philly, but there's a whole nother side to this UFO field that we never get exposed to other than somebody like myself.
Okay, and John, you know, with the 10 minutes we have, left, you were just talking about planted technology. In your alternative history of mankind, you do have an interesting section on with the Oklahoma City bombing. Flight 93 is in our area. Can you just give us how your conversation on the road trip with the hybrid lady works in ETs and UFOs into these big stories from 25 plus years ago.
Yeah, well, like I said, this was an extremely interesting conversation with this woman. And, she kind of took that same thing, that same stance that a lot of this stuff is planted, like the hybrid last year told me in the albino woman in Scottsdale. I'll tell you something really interesting with flight, not Flight 93, Pan Am Flight, what was that, 103?
103?
Yeah. So get this. I'm working in Europe at that time with UPS, and I spend Thanksgiving in Germany, so my wife is really annoyed with me at that point. So I'm supposed to fly back on December 22nd. So I'm done like December 20th. So I said, you know what, I'm going to fly. I'm going to surprise my family and get home a day earlier on December 21st, right? So I look for a plane flight back, and it's like $600 just to come back a day early. And I said, I can't do that. They'll never, they'll get mad at me if I switch my flight and spend $600. So I don't fly out, right? So the following day on the 22nd, I'm on the plane, and everybody's talking about this flight that blew up, Pan Am Flight 103. So I said, holy cow, that was the flight I was trying to switch to. I almost got on Pan Am Flight 103. So it's like one of those, you ever make like a split decision? It's like, should I not? Should I go? Shouldn't I? And I said, well, I really wanted to, because I wanted to get out of Europe and get home, because I was there for 3 months, and I missed Thanksgiving. And I said, no, I can't do it. But if I had got on that flight, my kids were like 3 and 5, and I would have been killed on that flight. So it's almost like there are times I talk to my son, I say it's like that Final Destination movie. So does any of these hauntings and stuff and the UFOs and what showed up in my house, did it happen because I'm not supposed to be here? I don't know. It's almost like Final Destination. I almost got on that flight and damn thing blew up, but I didn't get on it. Was I supposed to get on it? I don't know, but I'm still here now. But I went through a hell of a, 25-year period there. From 1999 on, as soon as I got into this UFO field, all kinds of activities started, whether it's preternatural, UFO, I don't know what it is. I really don't know. And I don't know any more about UFOs today than I knew in 1998 when I joined MUFON. I know the history, but I can't tell you what they are. I have my ideas.
Okay. Okay, it's also have another interesting section on the connection between presidential assassinations and UFOs. What did your passenger have to say about that?
Boy, I don't even remember talking about that. Presidential. I don't remember. I don't remember. I just remember the conversations with her where she was so convinced that they had upgraded us, and I, we kind of then talked about genetic engineering and creation versus evolution. And I'm not a big evolution person. I don't really believe in evolution. I believe in creation. And I think I made the comment to her that, if evolution is not true, then the whole alien thing is not true, right? Because how else would they have got there unless God put them there, right? I don't believe in evolution. But it was interesting, though, when the malevolent thing came out, she was very afraid of it and said, yeah, we have the same issues that you humans have with these malevolent interdimensional entities. We fear them also. So there is something there. I mean, there is something there with the spiritual side, the interdimensional side, and I've experienced it here in this house a number of times, along with other people. My kids have both had experiences, unfortunately, So,
do you think God created interdimensional portals on the first few days of 6 days?
Yeah. When you look at it, if you really look at the whole demonic side and the Nephilim and the interdimensional, and, even Michio Kaku and all of those people say there's 11 dimensions. You don't know, what's there. I don't know. I think if you take the whole demonic story, the way they fell, and really they have, the earth more or less belongs to them. God tempers them and doesn't allow them to do things. But I'll tell you something else interesting. It just came to me. I'm listening to Grace FM, right? I listen to a lot of religious stuff now. And I get in the car, I turn it on. They're talking about UFOs and aliens, right? And what the guys are talking about is, okay, angels and demons show up, they're here, right? But when they come into this realm, this dimension, how do they get around? They're invisible and they can materialize to be visible, right? So, but they said, they're not Superman. It's not like Superman. They can fly through the air and fly from here to Paris or whatever, or move at the speed of thought. How do they get around? So they were trying to explain the UFO thing. And the one guy says, well, what if when they're in our dimension, right, when they're in heaven, let's say, angels, they don't mate, they don't have spouses, nobody's married in heaven. But then when you come here, like the Nephilim, you then have human genetics, that type of stuff. You could eat food, you could have children like the Nephilim did. So they said, what if they actually need craft to move around? And what you see in the sky when you see a UFO, that's either angels or demons, flying to wherever they got to go. And sometimes it's visible, and most of the time it's invisible. And I listened to that show, and then I sat and I said to myself, wow, what if that is really the answer? That what you see flying around are angels or fallen angels, because when they're in our dimension, they're in this physical dimension. They need a physical craft to get around. They could always appear to you, they could be standing next to you invisible. So I don't know. It really made me stop and think. I said, well, wouldn't that be funny if that's actually the answer to the UFO thing? Like a lot of these people have said, Lord Hill Norton. What's interesting too? Air Force in particular. Air Force personnel, when the government got involved in this in 2017, they said, you better read your Bible because this whole UFO alien thing is demonic. You better read your Bible. So they believe it too, But imagine if that's the answer, if they actually need craft to get around. I don't know. And like Philip Clark said, I don't know if any of us will know.
Okay. John, we have about a minute left. Do you just want to plug your Amazon site and your Philly conference, and we'll call it a night?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I enjoyed being on. But, if you want my books, like I said, there's 11 out there. About 9 of them are in this UFO paranormal field. Just go to Amazon.com, put my name in, John Ventre, and all the books will come up. If you want to watch any of the podcast stuff, just go to johnventre.com. And hopefully you'll attend the Philly conference in 3 to 4 weeks. That's November 1st and 2nd, and you just go to MUFONPA.com, and you can pre-register there. So that's all the stuff I got, and I don't think I'm writing any more books, but you never know. And I really enjoyed being on your show.
Well, we enjoyed having you as a guest, John, and hopefully we can get together soon. Thank you again for being a guest. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and Barbara and I will be back on Monday. Thank you. Have a great week, everyone. Stay safe in Florida.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
When you've got a lot on your plate, your financial future is the last thing on your mind. That's why Acorns makes it easy to invest for you, your kids, and your retirement, all in one app. Acorns will recommend an expert-built portfolio that matches your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. Download Acorns now and give your money a chance to grow. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns fees before investing. Acorns Advisors, LLC is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com.